The Great Pyramids stand as immovable proof of the Fourth Dynasty of Egypt. These rulers left a massive, undeniable physical footprint on the earth, engineering monuments that have lasted over 4,000 years. Yet the supposed final ruler of this dynasty of Titan builders, a king named Thamphthis, left absolutely no physical trace behind. To this day, archaeologists have never found his tomb. There is no pyramid, no statues carved in his likeness, and not a single stone inscription bearing his name. This papyrus fragment shows the type of evidence we actually have. The sole proof of his existence comes down to a few names scribbled on fragile king lists, compiled long after he supposedly lived. How does a king who commanded the greatest building empire on Earth completely vanish from the physical record? This disconnect between the physical landscape and the written archive highlights a specific tension. We are attempting to reconstruct an entire era using sources that frequently contradict the earth beneath them. To understand why a pharaoh might be entirely missing from the ground, we have to look at the people holding the pens. The scribes recording these royal names often lived centuries after the kings themselves. They didn't carve these official archives into permanent stone. They wrote them on highly vulnerable materials, which meant the official timeline was entirely at the mercy of the elements. Looking at these fragmented pieces of ancient papyrus, you can literally see where history is missing. Over centuries, worms, rot, and physical tearing destroyed entire chapters of these official records. When later scribes needed to create new master lists, they had to copy from these damaged, incomplete source texts, creating a historical telephone game. Because pharaohs had multiple, highly complex royal titles, a physical smudge or a torn page could easily cause a confused copyist to split one real king's complex royal titles into two completely distinct people on the next list. This means a name on a royal archive might not represent a real human being at all. It could easily be a centuries-old typo born from a rotting piece of paper. This left later scribes with a serious problem: what to do when they encountered a completely blank space or an illegible section in the royal records. In ancient Egypt, the principle of Ma'at, cosmic balance and order, was everything. This ideology strictly required an unbroken, continuous lineage of divine kings. Empty gaps in the timeline were culturally unacceptable. This leads to the first major theory about Thamphthis. He may have been entirely invented. Scribes could have created a placeholder name to neatly cover up a brief period of civil war or illegitimate rule, ensuring the illusion of order remained intact. But there is a second possibility. Thamphthis might have been a real person who took the throne for a brief time, only to have his physical legacy intentionally wiped out by his successors. Looking closely at these carved hieroglyphs, you can see how easily a chisel could alter the surface. The ancient world continuously recycled itself. Later pharaohs routinely erased older names and stripped away stone from previous reigns to use in their own monuments. Between the physical decay of papyrus and the intentional repurposing of stone, we are left with a massive historical blind spot. Today, an invented ghost and a deliberately erased king look exactly the same. Despite centuries of digging through the sands of Egypt, we have hit an unsolvable dead end regarding who Thamphthis actually was. But whether he was a lost king whose monuments were ground into dust, or a fictional placeholder created to satisfy cosmic order, matters less than what his story teaches us about how we assemble history itself. It forces us to stop treating ancient texts as flawless, objective spreadsheets of facts. Instead, we have to recognize them as intensely human documents. They are vulnerable to rot, written by people trying to maintain political stability, and deeply shaped by the agendas of the scribes who copied them. Every great civilization has its silent chapters. Thamphthis stands as a reminder that history is built on both the stones that survived and the errors that accidentally took root in the gaps.